Hello! Coming up today on The Mum Show, we're going to be talking about raising boys. And I've got life coach and mum of 3 boys, April Joy Serrant, joining us today to give us some of her tips. So get comfortable and let's get started. To another episode of The Mum Show. I'm here again in the Mum Show kitchen with play therapist Emma Brown, Pastor Claire Hooper, and a very special guest today. We have April Joy Serrant. You're back again. We've had you here before and we're so glad you came back. And today we're going to be talking about raising our boys, how to raise boys into strong, solid men of God. So glad that we're doing this topic because I've got a little boy.
Yeah.
And you've got 3, so you're going to give me some of that wisdom that I need. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
So I'd like to open up a question first of all to you all. Do you think there is a difference between raising a boy and raising a girl? And I've just realised I'm the only one that's doing both. Would you like the answer?
I
You are, Claire, you're ahead of me. Go for it.
Oh yeah, there is. But there's just differences in raising different human beings. But there are definitely some differences. I bet there's some brain in that as well, brain science. In what you need to, how you need to nature and nurture them for sure.
Yeah,
Would you?
yeah. I mean, I think there is brain science to do with kind of the differences between males and females, and the male brain and the female brain. But I think what's for the purpose of this episode, what feels really important is how do we raise our boys in a way that is perhaps against how society and the kind of the culture that we live in now expects from our boys and men. Because, you know, from my perspective, I haven't got sons, I've got daughters. And I haven't got brothers either, so I'm kind of, you know, I'm not coming at it from that angle. But I do work with a lot of young men, and actually in terms of the difficulties that I see in our teenage boys and how they struggle to express themselves, and I feel like that is really in part about the kind of expectations that are on men from this society. I think the expectation is for boys, and it gets fed through social media and TV and film. I think we're expecting our boys to be kind of, you know, men who don't really aren't comfortable showing emotion. Men should keep kind of their feelings to themselves. They shouldn't express themselves. They should be self-reliant. I think we get a lot of aggressive kind of images and things that come across through film and other, you know, video games and things like that. And I think it's a real problem. Certainly when we look at you know, the kind of the impact on young men's mental health. You know,
That's huge, isn't it? There's a huge statistic on the number of men and young men that struggle with mental health.
Yeah, and actually, in terms of it's the biggest killer of young men and men in general actually is suicide. And we have to kind of take that really seriously. In fact, it's 3 times, men are 3 times as likely to kind of end their lives through suicide than females are. Yeah. And I do feel that is in part to do with the expectation on men to not go there, to not have to talk about their feelings, to kind of not acknowledge what's going on internally for them. It feels like a big issue.
Do you think, and I absolutely agree with what you're saying, and I see that, like for Ruben, my little boy, for instance, I noticed that if I want to buy them both stationery, Lilia has something that's a really pleasing colour, that's a really nice eye palette, that's going to inspire creativity. I don't know if you've noticed, but the boys, it just feels really dark and gloomy and boring or silly.
Yeah.
It's never anything like, it's got to be something ridiculous or it's got to be something. Do you find that when you're shopping for your boys at all?
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely think that we put them in this box where stuff is silly or very aggressive.
And it's hard to, I find that as a mum, I find that really hard to tolerate sometimes and I went into one shop and I was just like, this isn't acceptable. Talk to whoever makes your stationery because my little boy, I want him to have a positive association to drawing and writing and expressing himself, and you're taking that away from him because his sister has got this amazing kit and you're making all this stuff, and the truth is he doesn't want a pink and pale blue fluffy glittery. He doesn't want that. So it's nothing to do with me saying boys can't have pink fluff. He doesn't want pink fluff. He would throw it across the room. But do you think, you know, you were saying about how boys open up differently or they're not opening up. I sometimes wonder, do you think boys have a different language at times?
Yeah, I think that what I'm saying is that I'm not saying that we should raise our boys exactly the same way that we raise our girls. Because there are, you know, there's physiological, there's kind of internal, there's brain differences, there's chemical differences between males and females, and they should be celebrated. Those differences should be celebrated. But I suppose where I'm coming from is that it's the expectations that we have on boys that feels different. The expectation that they don't talk to each other, they don't open up, they don't kind of tune into themselves, they don't, you know, that they haven't really necessarily learned a language of what they're, you know, all the different emotions that they feel. And we've seen on some of these episodes have been really encouraging to me, because we've seen young boys who have clearly had a different experience, where they've had parents that have really kind of fostered you know, those qualities of compassion and empathy in their boys, and they've not been afraid to do so. And I think we absolutely all need to take responsibility as parents to try and instill that in our boys.
I think you're right. We in our family we tell them Reuben what a gentleman is.
Yeah,
we always go, oh, gentlemen always do this and gentlemen always do that, and he will say it back again. He'll go, oh, that was so gentlemanly of me, wasn't it? But it isn't what traditionally is said is gentlemanly, but it's actually things like when he's able to express himself. So if he comes over to me and says, Mummy, I feel left out, then I would say, oh, that was such a gentlemanly thing to do, to tell me that rather than get angry. And but you have to be quite intentional, don't you? Do you find that?
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got to keep the conversation going. I don't have girls, I just have 3 boys, but I am a girl. And I know girls love to talk. Sometimes boys aren't as talkative. And so I've often found that with intent, I have to keep the conversation going. And actually, my mum told me years ago, evening time, she often found for my older brother was a time when stuff would trickle out. And so she would always say to me, just make sure your ear's to the ground, make sure you're there, make sure you're not too busy, make sure there's not too much on, because stuff sometimes trickles out. And I do find that when my boys come out of school, how's your day? Fine, gone. They don't want to talk too much about it. But throughout the evening, as the night goes on, stuff trickles out. Oh, this happened. Oh, he wasn't kind. Somebody said this. And often I think our society, as mums, we can be so busy. We sometimes forget to be really aware, because they do have stuff to say and they do have emotions playing out, as much as somebody who expresses them in a really, you know, expressionate way. They do have emotions. Sometimes we just maybe have to tune into them a little bit differently.
It's being intentional about that, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And creating a home where where there's an environment where there's permission to talk, so it's really welcomed and celebrated to be able to kind of have those discussions and to talk about feelings, because actually, you know, the only thing that we can control really is what goes on in our homes. We can't control, you know, the environment of school potentially. Perhaps isn't as safe a place for boys to feel that they can talk about how they feel. But as long as we're kind of creating an environment at home where they can do that, I think that's a really good starting point.
And it's really important they learn to process with a woman, which is why mums are so valuable to boys, because they're going to spend their lives with a woman. And if they can't learn to articulate themselves with a woman now, they're going to really struggle when they bump into having a wife who they're trying to communicate to, and maybe then walk into that and don't know what to do because it's so different than what they experienced. It's not always just let dad deal with that. When dad gets home, we'll deal with that. It's learning to process life with you, and you're training him and coaching him. This is how a woman thinks. This is how a woman behaves. It's like from the moment that your boys are born, you're helping them, you pay it forward to their future wives. You're helping to think about everything, the skills that you give them, the approaches, the filters that they do life with, the thoughts that they have towards women, how they treat women as their, you know, to teach them how to treat them as their younger sister and their, you know, and to treat women well. And that is our job. That is our job as mums.
And I find that really interesting, Claire, because you've got a daughter as well. And you have to manage that dynamic as well, don't you? Because there are the differences, like the traditional differences. They do aggressive things for boys because men, by their nature, are strong and powerful. And women, by their nature, you know, we're different. And like you say, girls can often like to talk. We can be very verbal. And I can't ignore those differences between my son and daughter. And so sometimes I've had to say to them, like I'll say to my little boy, who is strong, and he's younger than her, but he's really powerful, and he will grow taller than her because she's a little one. And I say to him, use your power to help, not hurt, you know, and use your words to build kindness.
Articulate yourself,
and because you just know that that these things are going to come up.
April, did you find, because when, I don't know what you've done about toys with them growing up, but I've been very proactive with mine are all, my boys are old now, 15 and 18, but when they were little I was very proactive in including just toys, non-gender specific. So they did have prams and dressing up clothes, and they did have dolls, and they did have small world play. They did have all of that, and they did play with those things, but they just did it in a very different way. And I never tried to manipulate the way they wanted to play. So they would have a doll's pram, but there's no way they put a baby in it. They put each other in it and push each other around, drag it, push each other into the walls. Or then they had small world play. They had Sylvanian families, and they had little dolls and things. It wasn't just boy small world play. I brought into their life that variety that girls have that gives them sometimes the, you know, the articulation, the different language, and it develops their language about family units. And they had their own narrative that they created, but it was really healthy, and I've seen the benefit of that now when they're able to speak and articulate with different groups of people when they're older. Really recommend it. Do you do that with your boys?
Yeah, absolutely. Although, so thinking on that line, they do have a range of toys, but no matter how lovely or cute the toy is, if it's in the hands of my boys, it's often smashed and crushed and thrown and
explored. Sometimes they just pull things apart, see how they
Just
work and put them
because,
back together, or definitely. But still expose them.
Absolutely. My little boy, he's got, if my daughter's playing with dolls and he wants to play with her, he'll always be the taxi driver. And he'll pick them all up. It's like, I'm here, come on my bus, right, on you get, and they all get on. And I'm like, that's just hilarious. But he's always like a Formula One taxi driver. And he flies them round the room as fast as he can. But it's like you say, Clay, you have to, don't you? You have to not feel like they're going to do it anyway. They are going to rough and tumble. They are going to fight. They are going to shout. They're going to do all those things that boys love to do. Because I think it's true, isn't it, that they have different needs.
There is, but there is always, you know, I don't want us to kind of get into a place of pigeonholing boys, because there are boys that are much more kind of, I guess, more in touch with their femininity and kind of, you know, that part of their brain. We kind of think of it in left and right hemispheres, and you know, boys tend to lean towards the left being more dominant. So the left brain is the logic. You know, think of L for kind of logic. So problem solving, mathematical. You know, the kind of scientific, mathematical language. And then the right brain is much more the kind of creative side, and links much more to the emotional part. So yes, our brains have got both sides. There tends to be one slightly more dominant than the other, but equally some boys and some men are much more right brain dominant, but they then struggle with their own. They have their own struggles of, you know, kind of maybe I should be more like this, but I'm not. I know that my husband, he's you know, he's 6 foot tall. He works within the prison service. He looks quite scary at times. I remember when we first started going out and we'd go shopping, I was wondering why the security guards were always following us around the shop. So I'm like, hang on a minute, and I realised it's because of him. So anyway, he's a bit older now, so we don't really have that problem anymore. So the perception of him is that he's a blokey bloke, but actually, He's not really into sport. He's never really liked kind of football or anything like that.
Gentle giant.
Yeah, but he's much, people will walk into our house and say, oh, I love all the, the kind of ornaments or the soft furnishings or the pictures, and they assume it's me, and it isn't, it's him. And he has he's much more in touch with that part of his brain, and, thankfully we've had 2 girls, so he's been able to kind of really go with that. But I think we just need to be careful that, yes, there are tendencies, but we also, bring up boys who are kind of much more, I suppose, that way leaning and much more open to that side.
We reflect
of themselves.
Jesus, don't we?
Absolutely.
But what ticks me off, can I just say, because I don't say that very often, I don't think, is the way sometimes people in church pigeonhole people. And this is the version of Jesus that we want our men to be. Every church does it differently. We want the meek and mild Jesus in this church. We want, oh, no, we want the Jesus that can preach really well in this church. And we want this, and like, Jesus did, he went into he turned tables over, he fashioned whips, he was really strong and direct with people. Then he bent down and he healed people, and then he spoke to people in different ways, and he was risk-taking, and then he cared for people's needs by feeding them. I'm like, that is just, that's personhood, isn't it? But that is mankind, and I think we've just got to get off the bus on trying to say that we want this version, our man, or men in the church, to be this version of Jesus and this version only. And if you're not, then you're not good enough. It's not,
so
that's
damaging.
just,
That's what breeds so much anxiety, isn't it? Is that I need to fit in here, but somehow that's just so far where I am. But I think if you look, I find it really amusing when you look across the expanse of the Bible, of the Word of God. Like, can you imagine King David with his poetry playing and his dancing and his flamboyance and his building, hanging out with Peter, the Rock, who's aggressive and lobbing a man's ear off.
What on earth are you doing, David? Put the instrument down and get over here.
But it's like, exactly. But they're all being used in all of these really different ways, and you've got every colour and reflection, and that comes back to the thought, doesn't it? Like, as a society, are we catering for a whole boy, or are we saying, you've got to look like this? Give the boy a nice notepad. Just going to come back to that.
I think we need to question ourselves as mums. One of some of the questions that we can ask ourselves: what kind of man do we want our son to grow up to be? What do we value? What are the qualities in men that we value? And like maybe kind of question our idea or ideal of what a man is. And really, so it starts with us again, doesn't it? As it always does. But always. Kind of really kind of take time to reflect on what is it that I really value in a man, and is that my son, and how do I kind of bridge the gap between my expectations for a boy or a man, and actually, what's the reality of what my son has inside of him? They may not be, it may not be completely the same. It's important for us to question that, I think.
Should we have a listen to the kids? We've got a great, cracking group of boys for this one, so let's have a listen to what they have to say.
And action!
The best thing about being a boy is I always get to go outside a lot.
All your friends, which are boys, like the same thing, and you can chat about the same thing which you both like.
So what do you do with your friends that are boys?
We
build dens.
Yes, sometimes in the forest we build like teepees out of sticks. It can be, very disorganised, and I'm kind of sometimes depended on to pick the game. When we finally stop arguing and pick a game that we all like, it'd be a lot more fun than just when we're alone.
Alfie, what do you think boys are good at?
Well, they're quite good at playing.
What 3 words would you love people to say about you?
You're very good at football and very sporty-ish.
That's a lot more than 3 words, Speaker.
Do you think there's anything boys find tricky?
I find tricky sitting still for quite long and quiet.
Like 60 minutes. Otherwise, then I start getting really, really fidgety and trying to slip away.
Is there anything that you think the world needs to know about boys? Anything you think, if only they understood that better?
For one, I just really don't like being underestimated, because I don't know much, but I do know some things, and I don't want to be treated like I don't know them.
Everyone's special, like you can't say someone's wimpy when you don't even know that they are or not. And boys aren't better than girls, they're just the same.
What do you think are some of the kind words to describe boys? Good words that describe boys?
I'd like to say that we both try to be kind, we both try to be gentle, even if I am too rough, even if I am not gentle, even if it seems like I'm being a bit mean, I'm doing my best not to be. That's something I'd like people to know about me.
Why do you think God made boys?
In the Bible, it gives men the job of protecting their family and take the hard things for other people who can't take them, and to, well, love him, because that's why he made all people.
I think it's because he can trust them, not animals, with girls, and that so some people can know that God is alive.
Alfie?
I really think the same as Josh.
There's so much wisdom, don't you think, between them? I actually felt there was a lot of vulnerability in that one as well, which I found really interesting because there wasn't in other topics with the same children.
It was interesting, yeah. I think what Joshua was saying about kind of what's the man's role is to protect, and that I got a sense of that overwhelming sense of responsibility that I think boys have to kind of have to be tough. They have to kind of hold it together because the book stops with them somehow. And if they can't kind of hold it together, if they can't be tough, then what's going to happen? Some of the young people or young boys or young men that I work with often find themselves in a position where they either feel that they have to be a victim or they feel that they have to be in that bully position. It's kind of like the either or position, and often they flip between the two. It's like it's the only way I can escape feeling this kind of feeling vulnerable or you know, being potentially victimised is to become the bully. And actually I spend a lot of time trying to find the middle ground with boys. How can they learn to kind of know themselves and be comfortable with themselves enough to kind of say what it is that they need. So express their needs, express their feelings and needs, but doing it in a kind of respectful way, which doesn't polarise their position. It doesn't make them a victim, but equally it doesn't make them the aggressive bully either. It's a real challenge for boys, I think.
It's powerful, isn't it? They said, I think Joshua as well, all of them, there seemed to be a tussle of feeling misunderstood. And you were talking a lot about how you would communicate with your boys and listen in the evenings. And I'm really curious because boys are not always easy to kind of get talking and things. Do you have any strategies to get your boys talking?
You know, I found for me with my own children, and I spent quite a long time working with kids from quite disadvantaged families. The girls I would take out for coffee and we'd have coffee and cake. Do you know what I used to do with the boys? I used to take them to wash my car. Not for them to wash my car. We would both get scrubbers and we would begin to wash the car, and as we were doing something, stuff would start to tumble out.
So matches God's word though, because in the beginning, that's what man was created for, to take care of the surroundings of God's earth. And then when the fall happened, it became work and toil, which is why men fall into that, because that was not God's plan, for it to be toil and work and toil and work, but it was to have a sense of significance and importance in the doing. And then that's why then you fast forward and Jesus says, Paul says that men are supposed to submit and love their wives like Christ loved the church, to lay down their life for them, because he knows the tendency would be to take it all on himself and to shoulder it all. But in actual fact, he's supposed to just kneel and come to his wife in service to her, to use his strength for service.
Wow,
From the beginning to the end. That just makes total sense why in the natural that would work.
I love that. I think you're right as well. The distraction sometimes as well really helps, doesn't it? I found it interesting because my little boy had really missed me, and I'd been away and I'd been working really hard, and he'd been really difficult for my parents who were looking after him. It hadn't been difficult for me when he was seeing me because we weren't getting to see enough of each other for a few days. But when I walked in to see him, he ran over, he gave me a cuddle, and then he ran away, giggling. And then he came back and threw something at me and he ran. And I was like, this is like a puppy right now. Yes. But his language at that point wasn't, oh, Mummy, I missed you so much, which is what my daughter was saying. Yeah. Mummy, I missed you so much. I just wanted to chat to you. Let me tell you everything that's happened. My little boy was like, tag, you're it. Yeah. Seriously, let's do this. And there felt like there was so much communicating going on, rolling over the top of my back, snuggling into my cheeks, tickling my tummy, getting me to tickle and blow on him, and all these different things. And it didn't feel as though he was lacking conversation. It just felt like it was feeling really different there as well.
Such a tenderness that in that sort of
relationship. Yeah, and
boys can be really tender, can't they?
Yeah. But I think that's beautiful to kind of foster that in you know, that relationship particularly between you know, a mother and son, because the fathers often get the chance to do all the kind of you know, the kind of play fighting and the rough and tumble, but to have that physical intimacy between a mother and son is really important, because it's life, like we say, it's life skilling them up, isn't it? It's teaching them how to be tender and how to be nurturing, and that will absolutely have a positive impact on their future relationships.
And you've done that a lot, because I think this is quite important actually, because you've done that, gone to lots of work.
To keep that, you know, that communication open. My oldest son is never as much wanted to be close. He was much more playful and wanted to do things, but I've just fostered a different, not a weird need, but I'll just sometimes say to him, you know, Judah, can you come and give your mum a hug? Come and sit with me. Tell me about your day. And I found ways of doing that. But whereas my youngest son still really wants that time with me, but we'll do daft things. We'll dance together. Or we'll go on the trampoline together. Or we'll go on a bike ride together. Like we were out for an hour-long bike ride only a few days ago. We'll do that together. And he will stop and he'll help me. And it's helped him to be very tender towards me, and hopefully then towards other women. But I know that they're going to care for me in my old age. I'm hopefully not thinking too far ahead, but you've got to do the work now in your relationship and creating that connection with them that's not like treating them like they're just boys and go get out of the house, get out of the way, you're under my feet, which is also very easy to do when they're all around the place in whirlwinds and wanting your attention. It's like sometimes you put everything down, you fill a whole load of water bombs, don't you? And you get outside with them and you're like, I am going to win.
Yeah. I do that regularly. I am going to win. My football skills have massively improved as well. And for me, often I just take myself out to the garden and kick a football, and it's not what I would naturally do at all. But I just get in their world. And I think, like you said, connection. I think that is key. From the smallest age.
Seek it out.
I'm
always looking from the day when how can I connect with you? I do not go a day. I try not to, especially with the boys.
I think just at the end of that video, I'm going to say one last thing, so we're going to go. But just at the end of that video, did you notice what the little Alfie said at the answer to his question? I think whatever Joshua just said. And I think when we're raising boys, if there's one thing we could really seek out, if they haven't necessarily got a dad or a granddad, strong men.
Yeah, absolutely.
Strong men around them. We see that. And I love that Paul and Timothy relationship. I love that relationship of Jesus and the disciples. I love those relationships in the Bible, and we've got to go there sometimes, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
April, thank you. It's been so great having you in. We've really appreciated it once again. And thank you guys for tuning in as well. We're going to be back in the Mum Show kitchen very, very soon, and we hope to see you there. Bye for now.
Hello parents, don't forget to say hello. We're at promisecollective.co.uk. Bye!